Hey guys, you gotta watch this.
Oh, white women, why do you think everything is about you? Y'all have willfully ignored and excluded the contributions of women of color to women's rights organizing for way too long, including all those times you chose the patriarchy over sisterhood.
So, did you blue-haired, bloated bimbos with bleached skin really think that they were just gonna leave you alone because you're a woman, but you're white, but you're a feminist too? So you're an ally? Did you think you were an ally? No, we all saw this coming. The narrative has always been, is now, and forever shall be, F white people and F Christians. So if you're a woman and you're white, or a woman and Christian, you're a target. And that's the second rule of the left. First rule of the left, leftists always project. Second rule of the left, leftists always cannibalize themselves. You know, you see it right there. It's never been about helping women. They tell you, when they say too many white women voted for Trump, they're telling you that it's not about helping women. That's all about undermining America, pushing Marxism, and destroying the traditional family. I mean, hell, when they tell you that you should have stuck with your sisters, what does that mean? Does that mean you should have stuck with all 3 billion women? Are all 3 billion women your sisters? What about your actual sisters or your children who live in America? Shouldn't you want to protect them from the actual rape cultures that the left is trying to import? From the MS-13 gangsters who the left wants to bring in? No. All right, here's the thing, guys. Women, you're not a monolith, all right? It sounds so ridiculous when people say stuff like that because they're saying that you should all stick together because you have a vagina. And never worry about policy, about economic growth, about anything that's actually important. Just worry about your gender identity. Let's watch the rest of this.
Well, not today, white feminists. Not today. Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton have been America's feminist darlings since forever ago, launching the fight for equality. Well, for white women. In her speech to the state legislature of New York in 1854, Stanton said, "We are moral, virtuous, and intelligent, and yet by your laws we are classed with idiots, lunatics, and Negroes." And her fellow suffragette leader Anthony once said, "I will cut off this right arm of mine before I will ever work or demand the ballot for the Negro and not the woman." That's right. First wave feminism was hella racist. It fought for white women's rights by arguing against the rights of, as Stanton called them, degraded black men. Black men having the right to vote before upper-class white women? The horror.
All right, guys, let's talk about perspective here. Because when you look at propaganda like this from the left, when you hear these kind of lies, all you have to do is go research what was going on in that time. Get some context, and you will see right through this. You see, back then, women weren't voting anywhere. All right, yeah, you had some tribes that were matriarchal, and they'd go toss a little seashell in a bucket, and that's how they would vote, and the women could do it too. But it wasn't widespread. See, back then, the woman was part of a family unit. You didn't have divorce like you have now, and the vote was one vote per family unit. And it was a good system for that time. You see, the man would have a choice, but he would listen to his wife. Feminists always act like men don't care what their wives think. Like family is not important to conservatives. When if you look at conservative families, women are more happy, the children are more happy, and they feel like they're a shared unit. And that was good for America. When you look at the strength of any country, strength of the family is the strength of the country. Once the family deteriorates, once it becomes hypersexualized or hyperfeminized, that's when countries fail. And so back then you had one vote for the family, and the man had that responsibility, and he would consult with the whole family. And it might not have always been the husband. It could have been if the husband was deceased, or the rare case of divorce, they might live with a father or a grandfather or stepfather or something like that. So, you know, the man would consult with the wife, consult with the children, and then they'd go vote. And I do this in my family. Me and my wife agree who we're going to vote for. And if we don't agree, it's okay. But we talk about what's best for our family. And it's a good system. As far as calling blacks Negroes, what do you think blacks were called back then? You know, that's like going 50 years in the future and calling all Hispanics racist for using the word gringo right now. You know, political correctness changes, but you can't go back in history and accuse everybody of being a racist because you don't like the terminology of that period. So ridiculous.
It gets worse. Not only were black women excluded from the suffragette movement, organizers of the 1913 suffrage parade in Washington, D.C. asked them to march in the back of the line. They were like, hey girls, you can hang back for like another 45 years until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Okay, thanks. Bye.
So black feminists being moved to the back of the parade. That sounds really familiar. Where did I see something like that recently?
Fast forward to the 1960s and 1970s, and this culture of excluding women of color from feminist organizing spaces becomes more multi-layered.
The ways that they're excluded would be in terms of leadership, in terms of which communities are being organized, in terms of which topics are being organized around, as well as which resources are being allocated to kind of make social change.
Dr. Salamisha Tillett is a professor at the University of Pennsylvania and the co-founder of A Long Walk Home, a nonprofit that uses art to end violence against women and girls.
Excluding women of color, you're not actually tackling the crux of the ways in which gender equality and racial inequality and economic inequality work in concert with each other.
All right, what she's talking about here is what the left like to call intersectionality. And it's a BS concept that means nothing. We call it the oppression Olympics. Basically states that everybody's oppressed and we all have intersections where we meet with common oppressors. So, for instance, if you're a gay man and your friend is a Muslim, then you could say that, Christians are oppressing you somehow. First of all, nobody in the U.S. is oppressed. Maybe on the micro level there's some oppression going on, but not on the macro level. In fact, the only group that is actively discriminated against is white males, straight white males. I mean, there's more laws that limit straight white males in the U.S. right now than any other group. And here's the thing. Even if you're black, you could say you're oppressed, but then with intersectionality, a gay black man is more oppressed. And he can claim that the straight black man is his oppressor. But here's the other thing. If you're that gay black man, but you voted Republican, then you're automatically considered a white man and you are the oppressor of all the other groups. And it's bullshit, right? And here's the other thing. This woman, she says that people don't understand intersectionality because she's not getting funding. Well, we're a white majority country, right? These groups, these feminist groups, some of them have existed for 100 years now. So yes, they're going to get more money because one, whites are a majority, and two, they've existed a lot longer. And if you get mad because your stupid coloring book project is not getting money, that is not because you're somehow oppressed. Anyway, let's watch a little more.
And women of color are still out here fighting to save all our behinds. Thanks to the activism of black women, 98% of whom voted nope to Roy Moore in Alabama, an alleged child molester was not elected to a Senate seat, even though white women overwhelmingly voted for him. You're welcome, America.
All right, so what they're doing here pisses me off for two reasons. One, they're calling Roy Moore a pedophile with no proof. All they had was a couple of accusations, one from a woman caught lying, and two from a woman who works for Doug Jones. And then Roy Moore was in politics for 30 years before this and no accusations. But when he goes up to the national level and he has Trump supporting him, all these accusations fly off. But what's worse, and what pisses me off more, is that they're actually acting like the black woman voter in Alabama is so virtuous and enlightened, and so much superior to the white female voter who voted for Moore or Trump. And that's just absolutely not true. When you look at every metric, every statistic, when you look at level of education, the white female voter in Alabama is far better educated. By every metric, better than the black female voter in Alabama. And this is not by accident. There are videos out there of the women who voted in Alabama 3 or 4 times saying it openly. You have black women on YouTube saying that they came in from out of state to vote in Alabama. It was a huge Democratic Party operation. The Democratic Party loves poor, uneducated black women. That is their shock troops. Okay? Every election cycle, they rile them up. They tell them Republicans are racist. They, bust them to the polls. They get them all fired up and get them to sometimes riot in the communities where they live over injustices. It's all a big show. Because at the end of the day, after they vote, they put them back in the closet and they're left worse off until the next year when the Democrats do the same thing. And you can look at anywhere where blacks have voted Democrat for 30, 40 years, blacks are worse off. And I know people will say, well, Alabama's a red state. Well, guess what? All those red states are red because of the other voters, not because of these black Democrats. And when you look at the black Democrat-held areas, those are the poorest, the worst educated, just the worst off by far. And if you look at how blacks have done in areas where blacks have voted Democrat for 40 years, most of them are worse off than they were 40 years ago. It's a big Democratic Party snow job. That's their shock troops, and they consider these people expendable. They don't have to do anything for them. They know they're going to get them voting at 80, 90%, so they don't care. And what is worse and more anti-feminist than exploiting women just for a political purpose?
So why are mainstream feminist organizing circles still leaving out black and brown women's voices and contributions?
Most, I guess, obviously is in terms of leadership, right? So it's not simply like what issues rise to the forefront of women's rights movements, but also who gets to be the voice of feminism. I do think, though, it's much harder for white feminists to identify with the struggles of women of color.
This may explain why, when it comes to organizing efforts around things like Black Lives Matter or the killing of black women like Sandra Bland, white mainstream feminists tend to be largely silent.
Okay, when that activist woman says that white women don't understand the struggles of women of color, the left say that kind of thing all the time. I always want to know what struggles. What in the world could one group be dealing with that is so much worse than what the rest of us are going through? Especially here in America, where every advantage is given to people of color. You know, guys, unless you're born a Rockefeller or Rothschild, life is going to be tough for you, no matter what you do or who you are. Okay? All of us have burdens. You know, I grew up pretty well off, but I joined the Army, I got injured, did 2 tours in combat, had PTSD, went through drug addiction for several years, got arrested, spent time in jail. You know, my life has not been easy. I lost 2 babies. I mean, you know, I've gone through hardship. And I'm sure there's some people out there who had less fortunate upbringings who didn't have those kind of struggles. And to act like we're any different is racist. But what's worse is they act like white women are racist for not jumping on board every time a black criminal is shot by police, not going out and rioting with Black Lives Matter. And that's just nonsense. First of all, there's lots of white women who go out and protest with Black Lives Matter. They might be dumb, they might be misinformed, but they're out there protesting with them. Secondly, and more importantly, the left can do this with anybody. They can accuse any group of being racist for not supporting their agenda. And that's the problem with feminism. It's the problem with all these left-wing agendas. You see, they're telling you right there, feminism's not about helping women. It's about pushing a hive-minded left-wing ideology, and if you don't jump on board with every other left-wing agenda, then you're not a feminist. And it's so ridiculous.
Oh, and when it comes to the gender pay gap with white men, women of color are still trailing behind white women, y'all.
Yeah, y'all. Y'all. I mean, look, when I say rule number 1 of the left is leftists always project, this is what I'm talking about. You have this video calling white women racist, and then you have a white woman narrating it, and she uses the term y'all. It reminds me of Hillary Clinton. There's those old videos of Hillary Clinton talking to black crowds, and when she's in front of a black crowd, she's like, "Oh, Lordy, I have seen the mountaintop." And, you know, it's just such pandering. And that's what the left do. They pander to minorities. It's what they do. They don't treat minorities like equals. They treat them like little puppets, little purse puppies. As far as the wage gap, we know why that exists. Okay, it's been debunked a million times. As far as the wage gap between white women and black women, I'm sure they're not counting level of education or a million other things into that. So, you know, there's a little bit more of this, but let's wrap it up.